The Tanzimat, literally meaning reorganization of the Ottoman Empire, was a period of reformation that began in 1839 and ended with the first constitutional era in 1876. The Tanzimat reform era was characterized by various attempts to modernize the Ottoman Empire and to secure its territorial integrity against nationalist movements from within and aggressive powers from outside of the state. The reforms encouraged Ottomanism among the diverse ethnic groups of the empire, attempting to stem the tide of nationalist movements within the Ottoman Empire. The reforms sought to grant emancipation to non-Muslim subjects of the empire and to integrate non-Turks more thoroughly into Ottoman society by enhancing their civil liberties and granting them equality throughout the empire. Origins. The Tanzimat emerged from the minds of reformist sultans like Mahmud II and Abdul-Hamid I and prominent, often European-educated bureaucrats, who recognized that old religious and military institutions no longer met the needs of the empire. Most of the symbolic changes, such as uniforms, were aimed at changing the mindset of imperial administrators. Many of the officials that were affiliated with the government were encouraged to wear a more Western style of dress. Many of the reforms were attempts to adopt successful European practices. The reforms were heavily influenced by the Napoleonic Code and French law under the Second Empire as a direct result of the increasing number of Ottoman students being educated in France. Changes included the elimination of the Devshirme system of conscription in favor of universal conscription, educational, institutional and legal reforms, and systematic attempts at eliminating corruption. Included in the Tanzimat was a policy of so-called Ottomanism, which was meant to unite all of the different peoples living in Ottoman territories. Muslim and non-Muslim, Turkish and Greek, Armenian and Jewish, Kurd and Arab. This policy officially began with the Edict of Governor of 1839, declaring equality before the law for both Muslim and non-Muslim Ottomans. Causes and goals. The ambitious project was launched to combat the slow decline of the empire that had seen its borders shrink and its strength weakened in comparison to the European powers. There were internal as well as external reasons for the reforms. Internally, the Ottoman Empire hoped that, by getting rid of the Millet System, it would be able to control directly all of its citizens through the creation of a more centralized government. This change was also meant to increase the legitimacy of Ottoman rule. Another major hope was that by being more open to various demographics, more people would be attracted into the empire. There was fear of internal strife between Muslims and non-Muslims, and allowing more religious freedom to all was supposed to diminish this threat. Giving more rights to the Christians was considered likely to reduce the danger of outside intervention on their behalf. Externally, the Ottomans were growing scared of an escalating intervention of the European powers in Ottoman affairs, this being a driving reason for the Tanzimat reforms. After the Crimean War, which was caused by Russia's incursion into the Ottoman Empire in the 1850s, the Ottoman leaders tried to avoid a repeat of the situation. They thought that the great powers would accept the Tanzimat as long as reforms were ongoing, leaving them to act as enforcers of these goals. Reforms. The Tanzimat reforms began under Sultan Mahmud II. On November 3, 1839, Sultan Abdul-Hamid issued a Hat-i-Sharif or imperial edict called the Edict of Governor or Tanzimat Fermanah. This was followed by several statutes enacting its policies. In the edict, the Sultan stated that he wished to bring the benefits of a good administration to the provinces of the Ottoman Empire through new institutions. Among the reforms were guarantees to ensure the Ottoman subjects perfect security for their lives, honor, and property, the introduction of the first Ottoman paper banknotes, the opening of the first post offices of the empire, the reorganization of the finance system, the reorganization of the civil and criminal code, the establishment of the Meclis Imara Umumiyya, which was the prototype of the first Ottoman parliament, the reorganization of the army and a regular method of recruiting, levying the army, and fixing the duration of military service, the adoption of an Ottoman national anthem and Ottoman national flag, the first nationwide Ottoman census in 1844, the first national identity cards documents, 1844, the institution of a Council of Public Instruction and the Ministry of Education, the abolition of slavery and slave trade, the establishment of the first modern universities, academies and teacher schools, the establishment of the Ministry of Healthcare, the Commerce and Trade Code, the establishment of the Academy of Sciences, the establishment of the Surkari Hayriya, which operated the first steam-powered commuter ferries, the establishment of the modern municipality of Istanbul and the City Planning Council, the so-called Hatay Humayun of 1856, promising full legal equality for citizens of all religions, the abolition of the Devshirme system of military conscription, allowing adult non-Muslims to become soldiers, various provisions for the better administration of the public service and advancement of commerce, the establishment of the first telegraph networks and railway networks, the replacement of guilds with factories, the establishment of the Ottoman Central Bank and the Ottoman Stock Exchange, the Land Code, the permission for private sector publishers and printing firms with the Serbesti Kursad Nizam namesai, the decriminalization of homosexuality, the establishment of the Civil Service School, an institution of higher learning for civilians, the establishment of the School of Economical and Political Sciences, the Press and Journalism Regulation Code, among others. The establishment of the Imperial Ottoman Lycée at Galatasaray, another institution of higher learning for civilians. The so-called nationality law of 1869, creating a common Ottoman citizenship irrespective of religious or ethnic divisions. The Edict of Governor of 1839, the Hatay Serif, lit. Noble Decree or Imperial Rescript of Governor, was the first major reform in the Tanzimat reforms under the government of Sultan Abdulmecid and a crucial event in the movement towards secularization. The decree, named after the Rose House on the grounds of the Topkapi Palace, abolished tax farming. It also created a bureaucratic system of taxation with salaried tax collectors. This reflects the centralizing effects of the Tanzimat reforms. Additionally, the Edict of Governor imposed forced military conscription within the administrative districts based on their population size. However, the most significant clause of the Governor decree is the one enforcing the rule of law for all subjects, including non-Muslims, by guaranteeing the right to life and property for all. This put an end to the KUL system, which allowed the ruler's servants to be executed or have their property confiscated at his desire. These reforms sought to establish legal and social equality for all Ottoman citizens. The reforms eliminated the Millet System in the Ottoman Empire. The Millet System created religiously based communities that operated autonomously, so people were organized into societies, some of them often receiving privileges. This clause terminated the privileges of these communities and constructed a society where all followed the same law. The new reforms called for an almost complete reconstruction of public life in the Ottoman Empire. Under the reconstruction, a system of state schools was established to produce government clerics. Ottomans were encouraged to enroll. Each province was organized so that each governor would have an advisory council and specified duties in order to better serve the territory. The new reforms also called for a modern financial system with a central bank, treasury bonds and a decimal currency. Finally, the reforms implemented the expansion of roads, canals and rail lines for better communication and transportation. Reactions. The reaction to the edict was not entirely positive. Christians in the Balkans refused to support the reforms because they wanted an autonomy that became more difficult to achieve under centralized power. In fact, its adoption spurred some provinces to seek independence by rebelling. It took strong British backing in maintaining Ottoman territory to ensure that the reforms were reinstated. The Edict of 1856 and religious freedom. The Reform Edict of 1856 was intended to carry out the promises of the Tanzimat. The edict is very specific about the status of non-Muslims, making it possible to see it as the outcome of a period of religious restlessness that followed the Edict of 1839. Officially, despite the official position of the state in the midst of the Tanzimat reforms, this tolerance of non-Muslims seems to have been seriously curtailed, at least until the Reform Edict of 1856. The Ottoman Empire had tried many different ways to reach out to non-Muslims. First, they tried to reach out to them by giving all non-Muslims an option to apply for dhimmi status. Having dhimmi status gave non-Muslims the ability to live in the Ottoman Empire and own property, but this ability was not without special taxes. In fact, there was constant pressure on non-Muslims to convert to Islam, and the danger of execution for apostates remained real. Thus, the Tanzimat, at least at first, failed to actively promote freedom to practice one's religion without harassment. For the Ottoman ruling elite, freedom of religion meant freedom to defend their religion. Effects of the Tanzimat reforms. Although the Edict of Governor and the Tanzimat provided strong guidelines for society, it was not a constitution. It did not replace the authority of the Sultan. This being said, overall the Tanzimat reforms had far-reaching effects. Those educated in the schools established during the Tanzimat period included major personalities of the nation-states which were to develop from the Ottoman Empire, such as Mustafa Kemal Ataturk and other progressive leaders and thinkers of the Republic of Turkey, and many other personalities from the Balkans, the Middle East and North Africa. The system was ultimately undone by negotiations with the great powers following the Crimean War. As part of the Charter of 1856, European powers demanded a much stronger sovereignty for ethnic communities within the empire, differing from the Ottomans who envisioned equality, meaning identical treatment under the law for all citizens. This served to strengthen the Christian middle class, increasing their economic and political power. Arab notables generally opposed the Tanzimat. They could see that positions of administrative authority in the changing Ottoman state were going to young men trained in the government schools. Beginning in the 1870s, many of the leading Arab families adopted the practice of enrolling their sons in the higher academies of Istanbul. Indeed, throughout the Tanzimat, the Arab urban elite managed to preserve their privileges and to make themselves indispensable to the Ottoman officials sent out from Istanbul. The politics of the notables survived the centralizing reforms. The reforms peaked in 1876 with the implementation of an Ottoman constitution checking the autocratic powers of the Sultan. The details of this period are covered under the First Constitutional Era. Although the new Sultan Abdul-Hamid II signed the first constitution, he quickly turned against it. State institutions were reorganized, laws were updated according to the needs of the changing world, modern education, clothing, architecture, arts, and lifestyle were encouraged. This reorganization and addition of state institutions resulted in an enormous increase in the number of bureaucrats in the Ottoman Empire. Some scholars argue that from the Muslims' population traditional Islamic view, the Tanzimat's fundamental change regarding the non-Muslims, from a status of a subjugated population to that of equal subjects, was in part responsible for the Hamidian massacres and subsequent Armenian genocide. In their view, these were inevitable backlashes from the Muslim community to the legal changes, as the Tanzimat's values were imposed from above and did not reflect those of society. However, the Sublime Porte assumed that the underlying hierarchical social order would remain unchanged. Instead, the upheavals of reform would allow for different understandings of the goals of the Tanzimat. The elites in Mount Lebanon, in fact, interpreted the Tanzimat far differently from one another, leading to ethno-religious uprisings among newly emancipated Maronites. As a result, European and Ottoman officials engaged in a contest to win the loyalty of the local inhabitants, the French by claiming to protect the Maronites, the British, the Druze, and the Ottomans by proclaiming the Sultan's benevolence toward all his religiously equal subjects. In Palestine, land reforms, especially the change in land ownership structure via the Ottoman Land Law of 1858, allowed Russian Jews to buy land, thus enabling them to immigrate there under the First Aliyah. In order to boost its tax base, the Ottoman state required Arabs in Palestine, as elsewhere, to register their lands for the first time. As a rule, the Falahin didn't trust the ailing regime, fearing that registration would only lead to higher taxation and conscription. Prevailing illiteracy among the Falahin meant in the end that many local Muhtars were able to collectively register village lands under their own name. Thus, they were able to later claim ownership and to sell the local peasants' lands out from under their feet to the new Jewish immigrants, as they themselves relocated permanently to Syria or Turkey. Alternately, rich Christian or Muslim families, the so-called class of the Effendis, were able to accumulate large amounts of land which they exploited by themselves or sold on. In Armenia, the Armenian National Constitution of 1863 was approved by the Ottoman government. The Code of Regulations consisted of 150 articles drafted by the Armenian intelligentsia and defined the powers of the Armenian Patriarch under the Ottoman Millet System and the newly formed Armenian National Assembly. Literature. Edward Shepard Creasy, History of Ottoman Turks, From the Beginning of Their Empire to the Present Time, London. Richard Bentley. Maurizio Costanza, La Mezzaluna sul filo, La Riforma Ottomana di Mahmud II, March Arnim Press, Venezia, 2010. Nora Laffey, The Ottoman Municipal Reforms Between Old Regime and Modernity, Towards a New Interpretative Paradigm, Istanbul, 2007. http://halsh.archives-uvertus.fr/docs/00/14/62/10/pdf/lafemin on ottomanreforms.pdf lafi. Une ville du Maghreb entre ancien régime et réformes ottomanes. Jeunesse des institutions municipales à Tripoli de Barbarie, Paris. Harmattan. LAFI. Municipalités méditerranéennes. Les réformes municipales ottomanes au miroir d'une histoire comparée. Berlin. K. Schwartz.